Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can all hear me, and welcome to this Adobe Experience Makers Tech Academy around architecting the future of customer experience. I am one of the hosts. My name is Tony Stranick. I'm part of the International CTO office here at Adobe. I'm the chief technologist who looks after UK and MESA. And just before I run into a brief overview of what we're going to cover today and how we're going to do it, I'd just like to introduce my my co-hosts who are here with me. Let me hand over to Steve, next in line on my screen. So perhaps you could just introduce yourself briefly.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Tony. My name's Steve. I head up our enterprise architecture team at Adobe here in the UK.
Marius, you're next on my list.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Marius Shahati. I'm an enterprise architect within our pre-sales team in UK. Been with Adobe for over 5.5 years over various roles.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Marius. So good afternoon, everyone. Well, I suppose actually it's good afternoon if you're watching live and you're watching in Europe. If you're watching a recording or from somewhere else in the world, good, whatever part of the day you happen to find yourself in. But we just wanted to quickly give you an overview of the format. This build versus buy conversation is we found a hot topic, which is why we wanted to run one of these sessions, one of these live webinar sessions on it. A lot of people are having this consideration when they're talking about customer experience. Should I build something new, or should I go and buy what's the latest and greatest thing? And I think in a lot of what we're going to go through, we realize that everyone starts from a different position, and actually it's not necessarily always about build versus buy. It's about what's the approach, and maybe it's a hybrid, maybe it's a combination of the two. So this Tech Academy, it is a Tech Academy. We will be focusing more on the technology side of things. We have other recordings that look a little bit more, and other events that look a bit more up into the people and the process. We will cover those aspects, but again, the focus is the technology. I don't know if you noticed there was a poll on the start screen. I hope some of you kind of just put some response into it. It's about, workload balance. Are you spending time innovating? Are you spend time in maintaining? It was just to try to get the flow, the thinking going around, again, actually, do I have the time to build? Do I have the time to buy? Do I have the time to integrate? But and we'll refer back to that at the end and maybe have a look at some of the results. The way that we're going to run this session was to be very slide light. We wanted it to be more of a discussion. That's why there's three of us here. We wanted to really take you through what's our experience and what are the conversations that we're having to help you understand where others are and where they're going through this conundrum. Oh, should I build? Should I buy? What do I do? And kind of give you that level of experience. So slide light, conversation heavy. Hopefully that will work for you. If you have questions, there is the question and answers. We have someone monitoring that, and they're happy to break us if you can possibly do that to stop us as we're going. And or just use the chat, and if we don't get to any of the questions, Q&A, we do have some time put aside at the end. We'll respond back to outside of this session. But I just wanted to start out, before we jump into technology and things like that, it's that question is why is customer experience important? Yeah, why are we here? Why are we doing this? Why are we thinking about it? Now, I don't think it's too hard, and I think it's reasonably well recognized. And I've just put some analyst data up here that you can probably pick up anywhere or just go. The customer experience, if we focus on the customers, then good things happen. Those high-level business metrics are there. It's it does good things for your brand. It does good things for your revenue, and this is a thing that we should be focusing on. But you don't just want my voice on this. That's why I have other people along with me. So maybe I could, Steve, pass to you and just get your insights of why we should be focusing on customer.
Yeah, sure, Tony. We're obviously going to talk a lot about some architecture and technology in a few minutes' time, but reminding yourself, even as architects or technologists, why CX is important is a really good starting point. And when we discuss CX with our clients, the majority of value conversations are the kind of things we're seeing on the slide at the moment. They're very business and financially heavy and important things for shareholders, of course. But it's really important not to let customer value obviously be a side dish in all these conversations, and really take note of things like those things that are really hard to measure, like human emotion and brand perception, and things that brands really just can't risk getting wrong these days, like earning trust and not breaking it. A colleague of ours puts it really nicely in our architecture team. He says, if your attempts to improve customer experience are genuine, then customers will learn to trust you. Those small incremental gains, right, will improve their lives through your brand and can earn a lot of that immeasurable value beyond just what we're seeing on the screen. Now, Marius, anything further to add?
Yes, I think the other side that is sometimes overlooked is also the employee side of things and the employee satisfaction. And we also have a number at the bottom left side of the slide here. And we can see that companies that focus on customer experiences always have more satisfied employees. And why is this important? I believe that in a digital world, companies are not only competing for their customers, for their consumers, they're also competing for the digital talent. And in order to have the digital talent need a place that they are happy to work for. They place an environment where they are satisfied, but at the same time that keeps them challenged and keeps them when they want to work with the latest technology and deliver those cutting edge experiences. And I think just to sum up now, we have seen that focusing on customer experiences is certainly good for business, and also on top is good for your customer as well as is good for your employees. And what we have noticed working with customers who aim to achieve true CX-led thinking is that every millisecond counts. But when it comes to data and technology that underpin and serve those experiences, you need to keep the IT latency at a minimum as well as reduce the complexity. So Steve, let me send this back to you, and then maybe we can talk a bit about what are the trends and considerations that drive the CX-led thinking.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Marius. Well, continuing with the theme of putting the customer at the heart of everything, we can start with the obvious statement here that consumer expectations are higher than ever. I think a lot of people on the call probably recognize that. And simple examples like, Amazon's one-click payment service or same-day delivery options are starting to raise the bar when it comes to customer or consumer expectations. And that bar is carried through to the immediate next brand experience. And those tuned in to this webinar today may very well be responsible in part for that next experience. So yeah, consumer expectations certainly a lot higher than they were a few years back, and that continues to increase. And by the way, I hate to be the one to deliver the news, but consumers don't really care about those business metrics that we saw on the first slide, I'm afraid. Quality and consistency of experience is really expected now during periods of economic thrift, but also when they're feeling indulgent and times are good, as it were. I think the bar for customer experience is currently set at good. It's not necessarily great or excellent yet, but pretty good. But that really leaves now opportunities, right, for brand leaders, CX brand leaders, to innovate and stand out above the competition. But that's all about the here and now. Tony, I think we talk often a lot about the future as well, right?
Indeed, and I think it's it's also just by the nature of where we work and how we engage. I think it's very easy to just think about the digital elements of these, the kind of the online experience. But customers more and more want to bring together that online. They want that synergy between the online and the offline world. It's like you go into a shop where you're well recognized, or you go into a restaurant and they recognize you and they welcome you in. That's the same sort of experience that people now want from the digital world. They want to be recognized, they want to be acknowledged. And that goes back to your previous point about trust and how you build and how you engage with that. But also those online means of engaging are forever changing. There's forever the next best thing. We look at the kind of the pop culture channels that are in vogue, whether it's Link, WhatsApp, TikTok. They want to be engaged within those ways. There's always the next greatest thing. It was the metaverse only a couple of weeks ago, and until that all disappeared. But we know that virtualization is going to deepen. We know that things like technologies like augmented reality are going to come into play. And Marius, this reflects back to that point that you were making around real time and how do we engineer? We can see that people want to be interacted with in that moment. So Marius, maybe I can come back to you and we can maybe start to think a little bit about the architecture that we might need to start considering and the choices that we might need to play to kind of implement some of this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, working with most of the customers, I think there is sort of a top three IT considerations that come up most in conversation. The first one is IT rationalizations. So in the current economy, it's very important for businesses and especially IT organizations, and they are constantly thinking, how do we keep the cost down? How do we keep the technical cost of ownership to a bare minimum? And furthermore, how do we reduce the technical debt of our organization? So in line with the cost reduction, there's also a high focus on reducing the complexity as well. The second point, I would say, is being driven by the industry trends on trust. So as such, both governance and privacy are very high up on the priority list as well. And the last point, but by no means the least, is architecture modernization. So data is the currency for success. But with high volumes of data, scalability and performance are also top of mind. So as such, organizations are aiming to move to a more of an event-driven architecture, which lowers their data latency to a minimum. However, though, there is a lot of organizations out there that have attached themselves to technology. They have committed, and they have these legacy systems they cannot fully disconnect from. But even those organizations, they are working how they can become better, because business is knocking on their door and is asking for real time, for data in real time, and for personalized experiences, omni-channel. I just realized that I've said like two of the biggest buzzwords out there, real time and omni-channel.
Yeah.
But again, while buzzwords, both real time and omni-channel are very critical, even for the most simple and practical use cases, right? So if I were to buy a product today and go to my favorite social media or go to my favorite publisher, I don't want the company to advertise me the same product. I want them to suppress that at the time of purchase. This is what real-time and omni-channel is, not just sending a transactional email after I have purchased.
Yeah.
Similarly, in the offline space, if I'm walking in front of your shop, I want you to send me that personalized experience before I have gone past your front door. I want to see that voucher, the availability of the product that I was looking on my phone or on the web earlier, or any new items that you think I might like. So, because once I've passed that front door, or if you send me that message about 5 minutes later where I'm on the tube on the way home, it's meaningless. I will just disregard that. This, however, it is a challenge. It has been a challenge all the time, and most of the companies face it as a challenge today. So, Steve, back to you. Why is this an ongoing technology challenge, and what are some of the options that these brands face?
Thanks, Rich. Yeah, I think you actually touched on it in just there when you mentioned latency. And when it comes to CX and technology selection, well, let's take a step back a bit. When it comes to CX, the main challenge really is down to data latency and the number of distinct technologies that are required to actually, collect, resolve, decide, and execute an experience. Every piece of MarTech that an organization might have acquired over the years is useful. It's been selected or built for a reason, right? But the end-to-end challenge has always been a problem when it comes to truly delivering those kind of experiences you were just describing, Marius. I'm on the screen here, like it's by no means an exhaustive set of categories, but more often than not, we kind of see patterns where an organization, for instance, may have a strong IT-led culture and desire to build everything themselves. And that's quite rare these days, but and often when we do see that, it's supplemented with some kind of vendor tooling. The build option, what we in most discussions that we see with the clients we work with now, tend to be build via a cloud provider. So using the infrastructure tooling that is prevalent these days. I always find that interesting because I think that's exactly what SaaS vendors are offering off the shelf, often with a more comprehensive set of functionality for both business and IT. So building option, we see a decline of, but it's still knocking around. Other major options, and of course, are to select one or more technology vendors off the shelf with expertise and the capabilities you might be looking for, and look to integrate them accordingly. And what you might end up there with a set of point-to-point integrated technologies. And even Adobe here, our own history started off like that. Even the original Adobe Marketing Cloud was a set of integrated point solutions. But by doing that, Adobe took away a lot of the cost of ownership by managing some of those integrations on behalf of clients. That created the notion of the integrated suite. But since then, we've moved on, Adobe have moved on, technology's moved on. We've evolved that notion of a suite and moved to a much more platform-centric approach now, which actually directly addresses some of the key end-to-end challenges that we were just discussing about latency and the hops involved to achieve that end-to-end challenge. But hey, anyway, Matt, like you're the guy on the ground these days, working with more clients than ever before. What's actually your experience with these categories?
Yeah, thank you, Steve. I guess the first point, as you mentioned, is building your own, and this is usually a thought for a lot of organizations, especially organizations that have made an investment in an existing data warehouse or data lake. They think they can build additional capabilities on top of those solutions. And it is an exciting idea, right? To have the ability to build a solution that is custom fit for your needs. You're utilizing already the IT resources that you have, and you're keeping that knowledge in-house. But what this ends up being is this tends to usually be a very large project. And when you start working on those foundational capabilities that you need, you see that those projects end up taking longer time than expected initially. And then furthermore, when you start building those activation channels, there is tens, if not hundreds of activation channels that you'll be focusing on. And then keeping up with that requires more and more time. And then even once the solution is built, so you have all your capabilities you need, we are working in a very fast changing industry. So things keeps changing. So, and then maintenance, scalability becomes a massive challenge. So eventually activating cutting edge use cases becomes almost impossible. So building your own, those solutions end up being those silos that they initially wanted to break, and end up with having those very limited capabilities that allow them to activate use cases either on a single channel or a subset of channels. And if we also look at the IT team at this point, the IT team is heavily overloaded, and it becomes the bottleneck to any requests from marketing as well as business. Flipping the page though, looking onto the other side, incorporating an open and extensible platform. What this allows is shifting the focus of these organizations from working on these foundational capabilities to working on advanced capabilities that will actually differentiate them in the market. This allows them to quickly get our use cases in the market and deliver those hyper-personalized experiences omnichannel. And at the same time, they're not ignoring consent and trust. This is the centerpiece of such platforms, rather than the afterthought that it becomes when you're trying to build yourself. So all of these will also be allowing the democratization of data and capabilities across the organization, and will enable the marketing and business to also self-serve.
So Marius, if I might just jump in for a second, because I think a lot of the questions that I'll come across is people asking, so where do I start? How do I start this? You know, what before I start architecting the stuff, what do I need to do? How do I establish? And I talk about the as is. And I'm conscious of time, so I'm not going to go into this in too much detail. But what I've put up here is you know, a framework. This is somebody else's. I believe this is Forrester's, and it looks at all the capabilities that you might want in order to create that CX engagement that we've been talking about. And I think these are a great starting place. And it's not just saying Forrester's is any better than anybody else's. And it's not to think about the technologies, but it's to think about the capabilities. It's really a capabilities map, and you can start to fill in what are the capabilities that I have today, and what are the ones that I might need going forward. You know, typically, you know, a starting point where people will come in is we think about the loss of third-party cookies and the move to first-party data. Is how do I identify? How do I start to gather that first-party data and start to think about CDPs? But these are all really capabilities that we have, so we can start to use something like this as a map to identify what we've got today and what are the things that we need. And then as we start to think more about that kind of platform approach that Steve mentioned, is that a platform will provide a whole number of these capabilities. Now, you don't necessarily need to use all those capabilities for day one, and you might have some overlap, and you might actually consider retiring some of the more legacy ways that you've been doing things. But from a platform approach, it's about how do I switch these things on. It's not about integrating, and it's not about doing that legwork. It's about then turning those capabilities on as you want them and as you need them. So Marius, with that kind of as a scene setter, maybe I can pass back to you just to talk a little bit more about the architecture piece.
Sure thing. So
Yeah.
where do I start?
I surprised you with that one.
So, well, as Steve was saying slightly earlier, Adobe Experience Platform is practically Adobe's answer to future-proofing your technology stack for the personalization at scale. And AEP, and if you can keep track of how many times I'll say AEP in the next 5 minutes, you get a gold star in the end. AEP provides a set of consolidated capabilities, and it eventually becomes your one source of activation and orchestration and measurement of those personalized experiences that you will be delivering omnichannel. The first and the most core capability to focus here is that unified profile. AEP allows you to bring data from multiple sources, being those both Adobe, non-Adobe, as well as has the capability to capture those customer interactions with your digital and non-digital channels in real time. So all of this data is brought together to build that holistic, always up-to-date and actionable profile. I think actionable is the word that we need to focus here, because it's nice and good having a single customer view, but if you are unable to activate on that single customer view in real time, the value of that diminishes. So in addition to building that unified profile with your own data and data that is generated by AEP, as well as coming from the campaign sources, within a platform, you will have capabilities, out-of-the-box capabilities in the artificial intelligence and machine learning space. So we do provide you with some out-of-the-box models that can run on top of the data already on platform, and then derive attributes such as propensity scores, churn scores, channel affinities, and others. And all of these profiles that you have now built are available to be used in real-time segmentation. And platform AEP's segmentation is truly real-time. What I mean by that is so real-time, it allows for same-page personalization, and the segment qualifications, it happens in under 250 milliseconds. So we have talked about profile segmentation and some AI and ML, and before we move to the activation piece, you also need experiences, you also need content to deliver. And the decision management engine part of AEP will enable you to do that. Will enable you to find what's the next best offer to show to these consumers. And again, another point before we even think activation is that governance and consent piece. So what can the data that you have be used and what can it not be used for? What do you have consent to target these people? Where can you target them? What is their preferred channel? Within AEP, you have the capability to label the data and then build the policies on top of the data that tell the system what the data can and cannot be used for. And the system will enforce those policies and consent, avoiding total avoidance of human error there. Then basically what we are all here for, activating that real-time profile in those segments. You'll get hundreds. We have a very extensive list of out-of-the-box connections that will allow you to activate that profile in those segments in a multitude of destinations. But when you come to the execution of those campaigns, AEP works well. Well, we have our own Experience Cloud that provides a set of apps and solutions that do the execution. But AEP works well with those solutions as well as with any non-Adobe solution that has the same capabilities. What have I missed? The next thing to think about is you have activated campaigns, and so far we focused on activating segments. There is also an activation element of the profile. So that powerful profile that you have, the holistic profile, always up to date, that is available within AEP, can be accessed through custom apps. So the openness and extensibility of platform allows you to build custom apps. And a lot of our partners have already done that as well. So you don't even need to build something like that yourself. And as such, you will have access to that profile and make it available to your colleagues and to the different teams in your organization, making them way more effective and efficient. Similarly, the orchestration piece. So we do provide you with an orchestration capability that allows you to build a hyper-personalized one-to-one journeys for each individual profile. And last but not least, all the campaigns have been launched. Now we need to measure those. And you already have the data in platform. You now can start bringing in those campaign performance data, and then AEP will also be tracking the customer interactions in your digital and non-digital channels. As such, customer journey analytics becomes that capability to allow you to see those end-to-end journeys, online to offline journeys. I've talked for a lot, and I realize that this set of capabilities may seem overwhelming. And when you're thinking of like these days, this is way too much. If I'm doing overall, it feels a bit like boiling the ocean. And you're probably right in thinking that, right? But the beauty of a platform, and especially the Adobe Experience Platform, is that it is component based. So I'll take it a step back to where Tony started, right? You as an organization, where you want to start is thinking about those capabilities. What capabilities you have today, what capabilities do you need for the future? And once you have identified those capabilities that you need in the short-term, near future, then you can work with us to identify what components you'll need. And you can start there, and then those will enable you to deliver your initial use cases. And then from there, as you mature, as your company mature, as your team mature, you can start enabling more and more and more capabilities, always working towards your target state architecture. So just I've talked quite a bit. So I just want to reiterate and emphasize this, that the AEP is your platform for activation, orchestration, and measurement of your CX omnichannel. And it is an open and extensible platform that works really well and seamlessly with both Adobe and non-Adobe tech and existing data infrastructures, as well as activation tech. And Steve, sending it to you now, you have worked quite a bit with customers on the field as well. Would you like to talk a bit more on how we have seen this work at clients that have existing investments in enterprise data infrastructures?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks, Marius. Appreciate that. It's a very busy diagram we have on the screen, but this is not a session designed to teach you everything a platform can do, but just talk about things like patterns, which is and capabilities is exactly the point of a platform-centric approach. And when it comes to patterns, there's a couple that stand out. We seem to have a couple of discussions around every client. The first being even with a best-in-class cloud data infrastructure in place, whether that be on AWS, Azure, GCP, it doesn't really matter. You could have the best infrastructure in place. CX end-to-end CX latency is still a challenge. Like we talked about that right at the start. Adding in extra hops or round trips into that end-to-end journey is where things often fall down. It's obvious to say that cloud data providers are second to none, obviously, when it comes to storage and analytical compute and retrieval and things like that. But we've seen organizations, as Marius was talking about earlier, try and activate directly from those environments and have often failed after a first couple of use cases, because then that team become a bottleneck for the business and the backlog becomes too large. And so the first architectural pattern we often see and often come across is the one just highlighted here. We grayed out the other components, not to say that they're not important, but these are the ones when it comes to that are relevant when it comes to this pattern. And the pattern here is when there's a need for absolutely minimal CX latency, from receiving signals from any consumer touch point to then informing another channel in terms of delivery. Nothing quite beats at the moment routing data through our Adobe Global Edge network, and then through the various activation components that Marius has just been through, such as real-time CDP or journey optimizer for various egress patterns. This fundamental pattern here on the screen kind of addresses that challenge there of fewer technology round trips and as low data latency as possible. And it's also worth noting in this pattern that AEP and the platform even helps within the channels themselves, because the Adobe SDKs and approach we use in the channel to collect the data is actually bidirectional. And what I mean by that is that they're not only sending and posting data to the platform, but they also receive back projected profiles and audience segments via the Global Edge network. And that in itself, that two-way communication to reduce the end-to-end latency and routing it through platform and back out again, is extremely, extremely hard to replicate and could cost millions and millions of your own investment to kind of achieve something similar. Second pattern we often see is actually when AEP sits in parallel to a cloud data infrastructure. And the objectives here, again, are quite simple. I've highlighted just the components we're talking about in this pattern, but the objectives here are that the cloud data infrastructure and the investment there remain as the overall business system of record and the strategic kind of data direction for the company. And the AEP then acts as this kind of CX system of record, or engagement, if you will, system of engagement. And for this to be successful, both really need to be in harmony. And we've worked with clients who have established these bidirectional information flows between the two. So the cloud data system, for example, will publish derived insights and customer attributes, flags and scores into AEP, utilizing much wider data sets, enterprise-wide data sets that it would have access to, way beyond what you would ever bring into a CX activation platform. Marius talks about keeping the profile light and active. That's kind of what we're talking about there. Similarly, in return, platform, though, can publish regular feeds of streaming data, behavioral data, and real-time resolve audiences back into that data infrastructure for onward analysis and insight creation. Regular pattern we tend to see. These two systems really working together is driving some amazing results in our client base. And just to kind of close out that, not really a pattern, but something we tend to see now, an area that's picking up pace, is that our clients who are investing in the platform approach know that AEP was there designed to enhance an existing MarTech investment stack by reducing the latencies, as we've discussed. But over time, we've seen organizations now start to rationalize that landscape by migrating use cases and often rethinking the use cases to be kind of more platform centric and event driven, to now be executed directly on platform via AEP capabilities rather than a number of point satellite solutions previously.
Steve and Marius, I'd just like to thank you both, because I think we got through an awful lot there in a very short period of time. I'm conscious that we want to open up for any Q&A and things like that. So I just want to just reflect back on where we started this whole thing. You know, it's that question of build versus buy. But there's other things. Everyone starts from a different place, and technology by itself, we've mentioned this a couple of times, technology will always get more complicated because there is more things that you always want. There's more stuff that you can digitize. Therefore, by its nature, it gets more complex. And it's not just complex from a technology perspective, it's from how I keep those technologies, how I operate, how I maintain those technologies. And that's the things that impact the latency, the time, and all those kind of things. So there becomes a point where you have to rationalize, you have to remove complexity. And I think that's really where this platform approach comes into play. It's a platform to rationalize, yes, take out some of that legacy, but also set you up for moving forward. And it's not just setting you up. We as developers look at how we develop that platform. You know, from an Adobe perspective, Steve mentioned the fact that fits in. You know, we rationalize that joining the dots approach we were taking to a platform approach, and we're looking at integrating further. So Adobe Target will come into this the platform ecosystem. It's that kind of block approach to just I'll plug in the next bit that I need as and when I need it. There's other future technologies that we know are coming up, and we're looking at how we integrate those. You know, there's so much talk of generative AI. We're looking at, well, how can we use those kind of technologies to actually generate those segments and things like that you might not have thought of. You don't have time. So how can we use those technologies as an enabler to accelerate your growth and accelerate your ability to create and generate those omni-channel customer experiences? I got omni-channel in. I think, what was the other buzzword I was supposed to? But look, yeah. Yes. Look, I'm conscious that I was going to take 2 seconds there, and then got on a roll. Just before we head to the Q&A, there's a couple of other follow-up kind of actions. We've got a paper. This is more centered around CDP. We've been very high level on this, but again, a lot of people are engaging with this kind of build versus buy. What decisions do I need to make? So there's an additional paper that we got. You know, feel free to go and have a read and have a look. I'd also like to mention that we got Adobe Summit coming up in the 8th and 9th of June, where we'll be demonstrating a lot of this stuff. We'll all be there. Reach out and come and meet us in person. We'd love to get your thoughts and your feedback. To the Q&A, and Sula, if you're there, I've also opened a poll up again. I should have said. So the whole point of the poll there was to try and get some sort of a balance of how much time do you have? How much time do you actually have to do the building versus actually maintaining? And this is a good indication of when you need to consolidate as well. But Sula, what have we got in Q&A? Is there anything that we can address, or have you been fending it all off in the background?
Sure. We haven't had necessarily any questions come through, so a little bit of a shy group. One question that just popped up by Dharma was, does the AEP concept work as well for those digital businesses that have a higher ratio of non-authenticated users, or is that even relevant? So I guess this topic goes back to, you know, supporting authenticated users versus not. And how does AEP actually support that? I think that's our first and only question for the moment.
That's a great question.
I'll
kick off. Yeah, I'll have a stab and then see who else wants to jump in. Yeah, it's a good question. AEP, obviously there's a shifting landscape kind of that underpins that question, and it's the demise of the third-party cookie and the ability to track people and everything that goes with that. Absolutely, AEP can handle anonymous traffic and authenticated traffic. In fact, it's an area we excel in, because we want to collect that anonymous traffic to be able to retrospectively stitch it into a wider profile as soon as somebody does become known. Now, there is the underpinning element there of maybe the strategy and kind of and value exchange that takes place with your customers needs to be thought about, but to be able to convince people to authenticate or log in or have a loyalty program or sign up to a newsletter or competition or whatever it might be. There's obviously the business strategy that needs to be considered there, but from a technology perspective, yes, absolutely, you can handle anonymous and known and bring those together. I don't know if Maris has anything to add to that.
Yeah, I'll emphasize the point about your strategy about focusing on your first-party data here, right? We all know that the third-party cookies are going away, and there is no way about it. So rather than focusing on the technology capability here, I'll try to emphasize more the efforts that you should put as a business towards thinking your data strategy, and then the technology exists there and then will enable you for where you are today, where you have a high ratio of non-authenticated users, but also prepare for the future where you start bringing in more of that first-party data.
And look, I get very, very boring about this, so it's probably best that you two went first, and I'm time constrained by the length of time that we have. But, you know, I will often talk about this data economy and how we're going to participate as businesses. And it ties into exactly what Steve and Maris have just said about data strategy. But if you want, you know, do you just want anonymous data, or do you want to understand those customers? And where does that then play? If we're going to build these relationships with people, we do have to know and understand who they are. And then actually, how do we then use our knowledge and combine that with what other people know, and how do we get into data sharing and data partnerships? And this is where I see a data economy kind of starting to form. And that's probably a topic for a completely different day, because I could
well, actually, I wouldn't mind just rounding that off, because there's no other questions coming through, so I like just maybe 30 more seconds on that, because I think it's interesting that a lot of business users we talk to think you need to, when it comes to first-party data strategy, we need to know everything about everyone. Everyone needs to authenticate. Actually, not quite the case, because if you've got a pool, and to the question here, a ratio of authenticated to non-authenticated, that pool of authenticated users is what you would use to understand what are your high-value segments and your segments that have certain affinities to products or categories or high propensity to convert, that kind of thing. You use those insights to actually push those to walled gardens, and let walled gardens do the kind of the lookalike model in the match race to find new customers that are similar. So you don't need to know everything about everybody. You need to just have a good kind of understanding of your customer base and that kind of pool, if that makes sense, is what I thought I'd throw that in there.
Cool. No, good. Maris, any final comments from you? We've literally got seconds to go. If you haven't, if you haven't, your opportunity is now.
I guess we can leave it at that, and then, because this topic could go on for hours.
I'm conscious that I'd let loose on a platform and I could be dangerous, but
come
look,
talk to the summit about
it. yeah, absolutely. Come talk to the summit. But look, I would like to really thank everyone for their time. It's been a good session. We very much enjoyed kind of repeating some of these or going through some of the experience that we've had. Thank you very much for your time.